Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so today we've brought in a few panelists to discuss our sustainability legislation that we're going to be introducing for the 2026 session. And we've got some great panelists here with a variety of different backgrounds and expertise in the sustainability space. So we've got some questions that we'll be going over. We'll also be touching on the kind of 5 key points that we're working on with our legislation to address some key issues. And so we'll go ahead and start off with some brief introductions. Uh, Start out with Heather Trim, if you want to just do a quick intro of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Trim. I'm Executive Director of Zero Waste Washington. We're a statewide nonprofit, and our goal is to get laws passed at the state level primarily, but also at the city, county level, and a little bit at the federal level. And we had a really good year in 25. A whole ton of great bills passed, including revamping our recycling system for the state. It's called the Recycling Reform Act. It took 6 years. And then right to repair, so people can repair their own devices, everything from your computer, laptop, all the way up to appliances, with all the parts being provided by the manufacturers at cost, and the tools and the specs. And I very much enjoyed working with Jason and a few others of you. So looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Doug, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jason. My name is Doug Henderson. I'm the CEO of the Painted Rooster Cannabis Company, and I'm also the board vice president for the Alliance. Uh, we are a tier 3 producer processor out in Yakima, Washington, and we work very hard to ensure that we're using the most recyclable, most sustainable packaging out there. But I think that this legislation that we're bringing forward from the Alliance is really going to move the needle on getting some of the waste out of our system.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Sean, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Sean Finney. I work for Call to Recycle. We're a national nonprofit stewardship organization that manages battery recycling. We're in the US, in Canada. Canada is all EPR, different model, and the US seems to be shifting to EPR. So we manage all of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of outline real quick our 5 key issues that we're working on addressing with this legislation will be dropping in 2026. So the first key issue that we want to address is the rule set for our inner edible packaging rules for all of our infused edibles in the state. We currently have a rule that requires each individual edible be kind of flow wrapped individually as well as an exterior CR type packaging. And that obviously creates quite a bit of waste. The edible space is a growing sector, seeing some pretty strong growth in units sold. And each individual package that's sold typically has 10 doses inside. And so essentially each package sold has, by law, has 10 single-use plastic pieces of trash every time it's bought. It's a very onerous thing for the industry, ultimately creating tens of millions of single-use plastic waste every single year just in the state alone. And most other states that have legalized cannabis sales do not require that inner edible flow wrap. So this is not like some crazy idea that we came out of left field with. This would actually kind of bring us in line with most other regulated state cannabis policies, and it would have a massive impact on reducing our single-use plastic waste for that category. The second issue is we want to align concentrates and vapor packaging with the daily sales limits. Right now, you can, as a customer, you can buy up to 7 grams of either concentrated product or a vapor device, but the rules require each individual gram be separately packaged. We don't think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of, I think, consumer demand for larger pack sets, whether that be 2 grams, 4 grams, or whatever that size might be. And so we want to tie the packaging requirements to the daily sales limits. That way, should that ever increase or decrease, for whatever other reason, potentially in the state, that packaging rules always stay in alignment with the daily sales allowances. And we think that's a really logical way to go about it. And that we believe would really reduce a lot of our packaging waste in both of those categories. Because obviously, if you can have a vapor product that holds 2 grams versus 1, you could potentially, if that became the kind of the standard for the industry, we could potentially see, half of our vapor packaging reduced, and same with the concentrate packaging as well. The third issue we're going to be addressing is allowing for batch tagging. Right now, we have rules that require each individual plant in our state that's grown has to have essentially a single-use plastic tracking tag on each plant, which we just don't feel is necessary. If we allow for digital tracking and other types of bulk batch tracking, we can still maintain the integrity of the tracking in our state without requiring a whole bunch of extra waste for the industry. The next issue that we want to address is amending the no open package rule in our state. Because of that rule, we actually can't have any kind of in-store collection policies or programs that would allow for upcycling or recycling solutions. I'm sure Heather's very familiar with this, but any kind of sustainability initiative, if it's difficult for the consumers to buy into or execute, it's probably not going to be very scalable. It's not going to be wildly successful. And since obviously you have to go into a legal cannabis store to buy your 502 products, we feel like allowing for those empty packages to be brought back into the store and for key issues of either recycling or upcycling, that would really make any kind of long-term solutions really scalable and successful. So we want to get that kind of that rule amended. And the final thing is we want to require removable batteries for our cannabis vapor products in Washington State. The vapor space is another category that's growing quite a bit in the state. And right now, most of them, if not all of the vapor devices, do not have any kind of removable battery option. And because that battery is then tied to a product that will basically, even when it's used fully, it's still going to have some sort of cannabis residue in there. And so if you've got cannabis residue as well as a battery all connected to the same device, there's really no way for the consumer or even businesses to potentially recycle or upcycle those types of products. And so we want to put a requirement on that to allow for that battery to be popped out at the end of life cycle so that we can do something responsible with it and make sure that those get to the right place and get recycled. So those are kind of the 5 key initiatives that we want to address with our legislation that will be launching in 2026. And so we'll go ahead and start out with some general questions to our panelists talking about some of these issues. The first one is, from your perspective, what is the single most significant positive impact this legislation could have on Washington's sustainability efforts and the cannabis industry? Any of our panelists want to chime in? Go free.
I can certainly jump. I'll let Heather go first. She got her hand up.
No, that's okay. You can go first, but okay.
Fair enough. All right.
You go first next time. So our overall goal is to clean up our recycling stream and our compost stream, and get it out of the landfill, but make sure that our streams are clean, because when they're clean, they can then be recycled, resold into other things. So I'm excited about actually all 5 of these elements, but I'm particularly excited about the plastic tags. I mean, that is insane to have a plastic tag on each plant that what I've heard is now then going to the compost facility, and then what? I mean, this is just crazy. And all the labor to have to put them on and all the labor to have to take them off, when what I understand is that they don't even really do the intended use. But overall, our goal is to have clean streams, and all of these things that are in this, the elements of this are all things that will give us the clean streams and help have less waste.
And I would echo that as well. You know, keeping the plastic waste separated from our plant waste is always kind of an issue. Only up until recently, we weren't even allowed to use standard composting in the cannabis industry in our state, but fortunately, we did pass a different cannabis waste bill a couple of years back now. But I think that this legislation is going to have a more positive impact. Number one, in reducing the amount of plastic waste is obviously very important to everybody for the environment, but it's also going to reduce the cost of goods sold to all of our edibles producers. We aren't going to have to worry about these flow wrapping machinery. We aren't going to have to worry about flow wrapping plastic waste going onto the product in the first place. And ultimately, that's consistent with consumer choice. So I think that we're going to see a net positive impact on the actual process of these goods, as well as being able to give consumers what they're actually wanting, which is, you know, a more kind of standard candy enjoyment experience, right? I know that at the state level, there's often a lot of talk about the inner flow wrapper limiting consumption or whatever, but I mean, Halloween's coming up, guys. Like, I'm going to unwrap all of my dad tax candy and I'm going to eat it, right? So let me make my own decisions. I'm an adult. That's all I've got on that one.
Sean, did you have any insight on that? I'm guessing maybe with your background, you might be real excited about the battery initiative. Oh, you're on mute.
course I am. Thank you. I think from my perspective and from Call to Recycle's perspective, it's how does this shape out with the EPR legislation that's passed on the battery recycling? It doesn't cover embedded. And as you mentioned, batteries have to be, it can't be a connected part or have had cannabis on it for it to be recycled and be covered by the EPR law. So I'm interested to kind of hear everybody's perspective on how that waste stream gets handled as well.
Great.
And I will actually jump back, Jason, because the one thing I should probably touch on being the farmer here is these plant tags in more detail. We do not at any point really need to be labeling every individual plant. It's a lot easier for us to label a tray of clones with a small piece of tape, something that is easy to deal with, rather than a non-recyclable zebra printed tag type label. We don't really have a lot of choices when it comes to what we can print off on the printers we need, and so we're able to look at our fields and say this is where this is, or label entire tables, or put up a differentiating tag between one cultivar and another cultivar out there in the field. We grow 2,300 plants every year, and they get very big, but once we've placed them where they're going to be, they're not going to move. This is fairly easy to track, and so getting rid of the tagging is going to reduce labor. It's going to ultimately reduce waste, and we're very capable of it. So if anyone at the state level or the LCB does end up watching this, don't worry, we know what's where and why it's there.
Yeah, thanks for adding on to that, Doug. I'll go ahead and jump into another question. I'll go ahead and throw this one to you, Sean. What infrastructure is needed to effectively collect, process, and recycle removable vape batteries on a large scale? And do you think an in-store collection point is a key solution to implementing a large-scale successful program?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, any consumer behavior changing and getting collection for recycling, it's kind of multifaceted, but I think opening up to as many sites, and I know the EPR law mandates that there be certain sites per capita for batteries specifically. And again, we worry about on the collection site, them not being handled properly, right? So having them mixed in with our waste stream with the hazardous waste. So I think to answer your question, it really depends on education, the legislation, and then accessibility at any port. So at a large scale, it may be a retail, an OEM, or at the retail level.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Heather?
So the 2020, the extended producer responsibility law for batteries passed in 2023. And at that time, I believe it's the strongest law in the country. And now since then, several other states have passed similar ones modeled on Washington. So we're very proud of it. And it has, as Sean just mentioned, and you did too, Jason, an explicit exclusion for any product where the battery cannot be removed with a common household tool, like you can a screwdriver or whatever. What I'd heard from Call to Recycle, not you, Sean, but someone else, is that a lot of people just go ahead and put the entire vape device in the boxes, the collection boxes. But let me keep going.
That is true.
Right, yes, that's true. And so that's a problem because it's a contamination into the battery stream. But the other component, another component in our law is that any location that wants to be a collection site and meets the criteria can be a collection site. So different stores around the state could become collection sites for the vape batteries. And that would be, like, in my mind, a nice way to have a walk-in, some other sort of benefit that you're providing for your walk-in customers.
That's very true. And, at that, when the law does go into effect, it will be free, right? So that will be covered as part of the EPR. And we look forward to partnering with retail environments or any environment. The real sticker and the real issue for us is non-compliance on what goes in that box. And we find at the cannabis stores and vape stores, they don't pay attention and they'll throw, I'm not pointing fingers, but we seem to see a lot of contamination from there. And that's a concern.
Yeah, and I think the contamination isn't surprising because certainly for our industry, there are very few devices that are out on the market today that actually have that removable battery option. I've seen a couple unique ones that are starting to roll out, but it's certainly not mainstream or widespread yet. I think making those adjustments are actually fairly easy tool changes at the manufacturer level. With our bill, we'll be proposing some sort of timeline to allow for industry to shift and adapt and get rid of the old inventory and then, adapt to the new, get the tooling changed. But once that's in place, we don't think that's going to really impact the cost of the device as much. And then once we actually have a requirement where the battery needs to be removable, then that really cleans up that waste stream and allows for either something like Call to Recycle or any other kind of battery recycling programs where we could get those, whether it's dropped off at a cannabis shop or any other type of place that's accepting batteries. We actually have some other facilities in the state already that would take our batteries if we could get them out of the devices, but we really don't have that option right now. And so it's definitely, I think, time to make that change. Let's see. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. I'll throw this one to you, Doug. How will increasing the packaging sizes for vapor and concentrate products affect your business?
I think first and foremost, not any any business and all business, but certainly my own is consumer choice. We hear quite a bit about people that are looking for larger format concentrates. They want to see, the quote unquote baller jar. You want to see 3.5 grams, 7 grams in one jar. And I think that that's ultimately going to lead to a net decrease in our operating costs. If I'm able to purchase a jar that can stand on its own, that can hang easily from a shelf or do any of these things, I'm going to be eliminating outer packaging on the very small dab jars. And I'm also going to be providing consumers with exactly what they're looking for, which is a way to get in and out of the shop with what they're really after. And ultimately, we're going to sell, slightly more concentrate. So that's really the main benefit that I see jumping out on the front end. The other convenience that I think we're going to see from changing these sizes and making them more representative is we're just going to see fewer of those batteries on those disposable devices because we're going to have 2 or 3 or 5, maybe even 7 grams inside of that one vapor device so that someone can recharge that battery with a standard charge cable and then hopefully be able to remove it and be able to recycle it at the end of its use life. So I think that we're ultimately going to see a really good amount of capital being saved at the processor level, not having to worry about, individually gramming out those products. It's pretty fast to gram out 1 gram of concentrate. It is about just as fast to do 3.5 or 7 grams. It's just a bigger tool, a bigger scoop. So I think that we would probably see a lot of, other processors and other producers be really pleased with those types of changes. And not to mention the fact when you have a bigger package that is holding more, the ultimate cost is going to be passed kind of along to that consumer in a less impactful way. So maybe they're going to save, 3 to 5 to 7 cents per gram of that concentrate. Ultimately, that's going to give them a better way to consume and hopefully, engage with the product. And the final thing that I would say is when we're making these larger format jars, it gives us more ability to brand and to market. We have more real estate on that packaging to be able to communicate, what we're about, what we're doing. And I really believe that a lot of the producers and processors that are remaining in our industry would really like the opportunity to tell their story a little better, outside of Instagram or their website.
Yep. And a couple key points I'll add to that too is, we already have multi-packs that are sold in our state. So like the idea of selling 2 grams in a container isn't bizarre. It's already happening, but because of the regulations, people are doing a blister pack and then they've got individual jars within a blister pack. So that's additional labor, that's additional cost and waste. You got more single-use plastic with those blister packs. So, these larger device or larger container sizes are already being sold. They're just having to be creative about how to get around that 1 gram limit, which ultimately just creates a ton of labor waste, packaging waste, and added cost as well. So this wouldn't be like adding a new line of sizing to our industry necessarily. It would just be streamlining and making the packaging much more efficient and extremely more sustainable. Let's see here. Throw this one to you, Heather. What are the potential environmental impacts of these changes, particularly the reduction in single-use plastics and the recycling of vape batteries?
I'm going to answer a different question
Okay.
because I was thinking about something else. It's great. It's less, so it's good. So the answer is huge benefits. And that's what we want to see with all products, not just cannabis products. But I was just thinking about the bill and just the landscape for the legislature coming up. I've been on quite a few different calls lately to hear that the state budget, well, first you have the federal cuts to the state, which have hurt the budget. Then we already had a state budget crisis, which is even worse. And the Department of Ecology, which I guess wouldn't be 100, they might be partly to handle this. They're going to have huge cuts because of the MOTCO bill, the MOTCO fund decreasing. So I'm thinking about this bill. And it doesn't seem like these particular provisions would require extensive staff costs. It seems like, so I'm really kind of asking this question back to you, get a dialogue going here. There probably was rulemaking to establish these regs, so they probably will have to do rulemaking, but they can do expedited. But the environment we're looking at right now is bills need to cost nothing or bring money to the state this coming session. And it seems like this one would be one that with sort of very straightforward provisions, just maybe in some places changing a few words in the statute, might not be too bad.
Yeah, I don't see any cost increase in costs in any of these. If anything, there might be some cost savings.
To the state employees. Cost savings to the state employees.
I mean, I'm not sure about that part of it.
That's what they care about.
Yeah. But definitely not an increase in cost. I mean, again, these are all, like you said, these are all pretty simple rule tweaks within the rules that are already established, and that would have some big sustainability wins without adding any kind of additional cost to the state budget at all.
We do think that this shouldn't have an impactful fiscal note of any kind. And the reason that this is a bill and not a rulemaking request of the LCB is because we have made those requests and they have not been heard and not been moved on in any kind of way that is really beneficial to the consumers, the environment, or to the people engaging in the industry. So, this is a way to kind of take that rulemaking and simply slash it to make sure that we're able to, operate in a way that's consistent with where the industry is. And I think that it's the appropriate route. And ultimately we're reducing costs overall. We're going to not cause any net change in the amount of revenue that's generated for the state by the cannabis products themselves. They still will be getting their 37% tax on all of these unless we can make some changes there with a different bill. So ultimately this should be zero cost.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Circle back to the plant tagging, Doug. Can we provide just as good of a tracking system digitally instead of using plant tags? Is there any downside to that at all or concerns? It seems from what I've looked at, it seems like it's just as good a system just without the waste component.
Yeah, from the perspective of the state, being able to provide a plant count from my system is very simple. I can shoot them and export to Excel and say, these are the plants I have. These are the ones that died. I'm able to provide that without needing those tags in place. The only real downside is going to come at the farm to farm level. How organized are you? Right? I mean, do you know what's in your room and where it's going? And if somebody asks, hey, where would these particular plants be? As long as you're able to find that and provide that to your agent, I don't think that there's any real issue. And, being able to use, a cardboard sign or something that's easier would probably be of significant benefit to just about anybody. When you go down to like at the Home Depot to buy a blueberry bush or something like that, you've got, you've got a wrap around the pot that says what it is. It's got a barcode on it. It's got all of those things, sure. But there just are more sustainable ways to do this. And from the digital tracking perspective, you can use any number of programs to, control what's going on inside of your grow. And the tags are helpful when you're picking up where you left off, or if you walk out of a room for 2 or 3 weeks while they're just kind of growing and you come back and you want to know where things are. it's very likely that you've got it on a table, or you've got it in a row, or you've got it somewhere, that you can make a pretty straightforward map. It doesn't even need to be digital at all. Just have a clipboard, know where you put the plants that you brought in, know where you put the moms, and keep track of them that way. And that way, at least we're going to be able to say, here's a labor savings, here's a waste savings. Let's move on from there and be the professionals that we are.
Great, thank you. Got another battery question for Sean here. Are there any unique challenges or hazardous materials in vape batteries that make them more difficult to recycle than, say, a standard AA or lithium-ion battery?
No, no, not at all. I mean, they're just part of the consumer battery. It's a rechargeable chemistry, typically, and that's something that we take in the consumer take back. So no, the only issue again is if it touches cannabis or nicotine, then it turns into a different ballgame. And that's for HHWs, retail, we're a Home Depot. This is statewide.
And for those that maybe aren't familiar with your company, can you share a little bit about the product that you offer with the flame retardant box and kind of how that works?
Sure, we have a few, and I encourage people afterwards to reach out. We're definitely looking for partners, for collection partners always, and that's our mission. Batteries out of the waste stream. So we have a few different products. One is a retail box. It's lined with a Furby liner. It's a fire retardant material. It's in a box that goes out to our retail partners, Home Depot, Lowe's, Staples. We also have drum. As if you collect more volume, number of batteries, we have drum systems and solutions for end of life batteries, and for damaged, defective, and recalled batteries.
Cool. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I think I've got a couple samples of your retail box there, and it's I think specifically for cannabis stores, if we get those rules changed, that could really be a really great solution for some of our retail cannabis stores, where they could just have those boxes in the store. The customers bring their batteries in with that removable device in the future, drop it into those bins, fill them up, get them out the door, and get them disposed of properly.
Yeah, pre-labeled for shipping. And again, I sound like a broken record, but we encourage retail partners to reach out and set that up with us. And again, there's a fee now, but that will be free when the EPR hits.
So is that a state level, the EPR program on that covers that cost now?
Correct. Not now.
Or that will in the
In about a
future?
year.
Yeah.
Okay.
When it rolls out there, and there are 16 states that are rolling out EPR now in the US, so it's becoming more and more, or less and less voluntary, I should say. But it will be free at that time.
Great. Well, it sounds like if this is a great time to get this legislation done, so that we might be just in time to take advantage of that new program.
Yeah, it would be a good partnership, in my opinion. Absolutely.
Let's go back to just another general question for anybody on the panel. How do you see this bill affecting the consumer experience, both in terms of cost, convenience, as well as sustainability?
I think that's for Doug.
The convenience is going to go through the roof. The concentrates, in particular, I spent a lot of my time in the industry producing those, and there's something to be said for the appearance of what your product is. And so when you're looking through the bottom of a jar and you're looking at a single gram of a product, you're not really getting a whole lot to look at. So I think that consumers are going to be able to interact better with the concentrates they're consuming from, not only an appearance standpoint, but also, I mean, the amount of smell, how much terpene can come out of a slightly larger jar, is going to be pretty beneficial. I think that the other component is the cost savings on this. The difference between a single dab jar costing 33 to 75 cents, depending on what you're doing with it, increasing the amount of real estate on that package by going up to something that, say, is 35, 36 cents. That's going to be a drop in the bucket for us as processors. And we're going to want to kind of embrace these larger format sizes so that we can see, more savings and potentially, hopefully more profits out of those individual products. And from the vape side of things, be it, you know, cart batteries, 510 thread that are using a reusable battery already, or even on the disposable devices, having something that's going to last a little bit longer does go to convenience. You don't need to visit the store as often if you have a consumption, schedule that you're working with. If you have 2 grams instead of one, if you have 3.5 grams instead of one, the amount of time that you're going to spend, burning a fossil fuel to get to the store or taking the bus or spending money out of your pocket to get to that location is going to be reduced. So I think that we're going to see, a net positive impact on the consumers. I think we're going to see a net positive impact on the processors and ultimately a net positive impact on the environment from that.
Yeah, another thing I'll point out is most people that are at least in the industry are familiar with our little 9 ml, pretty standard kind of concentrate jars. Some of them are smaller, more like a 5 ml, but those 9 mls are really popular and widely used already. And that jar probably, I'm guessing, what do you think, Doug? It would probably hold 4 grams as is right now.
Oh, it would easily hold 3.5. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, if you
so,
really pack it in, right?
yeah.
So
So some of these, if we get these rules changed, that some of the existing packaging that's already kind of in the supply chain that's already being used by the industry, they could take that same jar and then put 2 grams, 3 grams in it. So it's not even like we got to introduce necessarily a new larger jar. Now they might need a bigger one for like a 7 gram unit. But some of the packages, you really can't get much smaller than these 5 and 9 ml glass jars. And because also of those size, those jars are not recyclable because of the size. They're just too small. And so, if we can potentially push it to some larger jar sizes, that might open the door for some upcycling, recycling on those glass jars. But also, if we are still using some of the current jars that we have, those could be utilized for multiple size packs. So we're not necessarily having to add a whole bunch of new jar sizes necessarily to the waste stream as well. And then we're just going to have less waste in the whole process. I think I've been down to Oregon multiple times. And there's actually a few brands I've seen down there that their rosin line, all they offer is 2 gram units. They don't even sell 1 gram units anymore. And it's in that same 9 ml jar. There's still plenty of room in it. And because they've got a good brand and reputation, people are perfectly happy buying that 2 gram unit. And obviously that saves that producer processor some costs, but it also significantly reduces that waste, right? Because if all of a sudden 2 grams are standard, where that used to be one in the old days, and you've reduced that packaging waste by 50%. So it's a pretty big win across the board. Another one I'll throw to you, Doug. With these changes also provide, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but some cost savings and efficiencies in your business, in addition to the sustainability wins.
yeah, we're definitely going to see a decrease in our cost of goods sold. Our general batch sizes for most producer processors on any type of concentrate is, around the 1,000 to 2,000 gram mark. Some of the bigger players may be dealing in the 5,000 gram. But when we divide that by a 2 gram unit or a 3 gram unit instead of a single gram, ultimately we are going to spend less money on the devices themselves, the number of packages, and that's a big win. I think that there are also, things that need to kind of be made normalized between tribal entities and non-tribal entities. Right now you can purchase a baller jar at a tribal store because of the way that those compacts have been written, but you can't purchase one at a regular standalone retail shop. And there's also further restriction where, you're not supposed to be able to sell, like I'm not supposed to be able to sell that baller jar to that tribal entity because, my organization is not a member of a tribal compact. So I can't produce that product for that tribe. That's a missed opportunity for a great product that I may have. And those that are out there doing it are playing in a bit of a gray area. We don't often see really market enforcement on a lot of these different things, but the way that the rules are written currently, only a tribal producer processor should be able to make that product and sell it to a tribal entity. So if we could get a little more harmonization across, the tribal stores and the standard retail stores, I think that we would see a good benefit to everybody involved.
Yeah, I agree. Heather, regarding these initiatives we're working on, how does this bill align or differ from some of your successful sustainability legislation that you've had in the past with Washington State?
We testified in favor, I think you all might have led, I'm not sure who led the compost law that allows for composting of cannabis greens, which is just kind of crazy that we had to even have a law on that. And everything that I'm hearing today, it just sounds so common sense. So it's really a struggle that you guys have been having to cope with. And then the new Recycling Reform Act that just passed earlier this year, signed in April, is going to be a game changer for the state. We're going to have the same recycling list across the state. And but flexible packaging. So the outer pouches that are flexible, which by the way, we see a lot in litter. Routinely, we'll find cannabis packaging when we do litter cleanups. So we want to see that go away. We want to see less of that. The flexible pouch that might be the outer wrap, right now would not be recyclable in the system in Washington if it's not collected separately, like a store drop-off or something like that. So you guys could do store drop-off. But I did hear this morning that up in Canada, they're on the verge of having a way to deal with flexible packaging. So it might start to become recyclable in your curbside recycling. So that'd be great. But we're probably a year or two out on that.
Yeah, the Mylar bag's a real challenge. It obviously has some benefits, both and really common use in a variety of industries as well as cannabis. There is an all polyethylene bag alternative available that is recyclable, but as Heather was saying, that's not curbside recyclable, so that has kind of some benefit to it, but it would be a lot more successful if it was easier for consumers to actually recycle that bag at the end of life cycle on that. But allowing some additional packaging sizes across the industry would at least at a minimum reduce just some of that exterior packages that are out there in the first place. So definitely be a good win there.
And just to say one more thing, I mean, I understand that in Colorado, you can do deli style. So you can have your glass jar go in and a sort of, I don't know if it's self-serve, but anyway, choose. And we would love to see a move to that in the future, but I know this isn't going to be exactly that, but this gets us along that pathway.
Yep. One more for you, Sean. And you did kind of touch on this a little bit, but what kind of public education campaigns, collection programs would be most effective to ensure that new removable batteries out of our vape devices actually make it into the recycling streams?
Yeah, I love that question. There's nothing specific. So the EPR law does mandate that there's an education and outreach component. So Call to Recycle will do that now. It's heavily battery centric, avoid the spark, thermal runaway issues. But specifically, I don't think we will have anything specific for the cannabis industry. But I think it's a great question to ask. Can that outreach be amended to specific segments, right? So let's say in this case, cannabis, can it be amended and tailored to recycling batteries, but in this industry with information, detach some catchphrase, I don't know. But I think that's a valid and interesting point, one that I can't answer, but I do know the stewardship organization does have to provide education and outreach.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you were touching on earlier about how you're sometimes getting mixes in the waste streams where you're getting the devices entirely trying to be recycled. Probably just putting an education campaign around that for cannabis, specifically around the vapor devices, just educating the consumers on exactly how to remove that, removable hatch out of the vape once that's a requirement, and then how to just kind of emphasizing the importance of making sure that when you are recycling that battery, you're recycling the battery component only, not the entire device in the waste stream.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point. I would like to dive into that more. Changing consumer behaviors on recycling is challenging in and of itself. So specific to this, it would be interesting to kind of dive into that more.
I'm going to jump into some questions from our people listening in. It looks like I've got one in the chat already, but before we do that, anything closing comments between our panelists that you'd want to include that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I'll actually jump in. We don't have our vape battery distributor here. They weren't able to make it today, but one of the questions we were going to talk about was kind of the logistics of the supply chain changeover to having a removable battery, and what kind of time frame should we provide to the industry to respond to that. And I think that as far as, costs, negligible. I don't think that it takes a lot to get a, little door put on the bottom underneath the battery that opens where you can remove that. I don't think that there's any reason that we wouldn't be using, like a, a smaller, different format battery that might ultimately be cheaper. And I also think that an appropriate time frame probably looks like 18 months, right? So that any of our processors who have already purchased, say like, 5, 10,000 devices, or maybe they have more than that. Maybe they've purchased 100,000 devices. Give them time to get those sold through the market so that we can implement. I think that that's a realistic ask. And I know that I believe it's 18 months in the bill that we're putting on it, or was it a year?
I think July 2027, and Heather, keep me honest here. Is that right for the battery bill? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about the battery component.
No, I'm just saying the time to implement for the actual producer processors, where when we can't sell another enclosed battery device, I think we placed like a year or 18 months on that, to make sure that there's time to get rid of that stock, so we don't lose money on it, right? People who are manufacturing these devices for us don't often take returns, right? So we don't want to bother with any of that. We want to be sure that people adopting this and taking this positive step are not going to be financially impacted on the front end. But yeah, as far as design goes and all of those other components, having done a little bit of design work in the past, I think that this is really realistic. I don't think it's a really big ask, and we can definitely make this work.
Yeah, the tooling cost is really a one-time cost at the manufacturer level, which, most of these are always manufactured overseas. And so, especially with the fact that most of them are done overseas, their tooling is very efficient, and they generally have pretty affordable molding costs and tooling costs, especially relative to the United States. And so, but we do need to allow for some transition time for the manufacturers themselves to do the design retooling, and then also allowing, like Doug said, the transition period for not only the producer processor to sell through their current inventories, but then also at the retail level, right? Because we have a non-vertical integration format in Washington State. And so we really have the producer processors that might have some inventory to sell through. And then once they're sold into the retail supply chain, those retailers don't obviously sell everything the day they come in the store. And so the retailers also need to have some time to sell through their excess inventory to make that transition happen. And so I don't think we've ultimately settled on an exact timeline yet, but it's we've been reaching out to various stakeholders and getting some good feedback. We certainly want to be conscious of that, and so somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 18 to 24 month kind of transition period makes sense. And so we're going to make sure that we have something built into that legislation to allow for that transition period as well. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and jump into questions. If anybody else has questions, feel free to either raise your hand if you want to ask it yourself, or feel free to put them in the chat. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and jump into TJ's question here. He put in the chat already. I said reducing waste is very important. The prevention community is likely to push back against this bill, specifically against the tying of packaging sizes to daily purchasing limits, as well as not wrapping individual edibles. What would you say to them to quell their concerns? Doug, you have any input on that? I can certainly chime in on that as well.
Certainly. I mean, we're the only state in the legal community that requires that inner flow wrap, and we are not seeing adverse effects in any other jurisdiction. So there is no factual scientific basis for opposition with regards to that. All we're doing is creating more plastic waste, and if we can eliminate that, we're going to be doing something better. Not just for the environment, but for the consumer experience. You know, seeing a bowl full of wrapped candy is only Halloween. It is not every day. I don't want to be prevented from enjoying my caramel clusters or anything else by an additional package. It also kind of speaks, and this is a big thing in prevention, but this is a 21 plus product. Everybody purchasing these things is an adult, and they have the autonomy to make decisions for themselves. We don't need to be policed on how much we are going to consume. We're going to do that naturally. Cannabis has a really interesting effect, when compared with alcohol, where when you are intoxicated enough, you tend to not seek out additional intoxication. That isn't the same with alcohol and with other, types of drugs. So, you know, we we are we are adults that are able to make our own decisions. We should be empowered to do so. And with regard to, larger packaging sizes for concentrates, what I would respond to there is very simply, people are still buying them anyway. There is nothing stopping me from opening 3 containers at the same time. And if I want to throw down a 3 gram dab and waste all of that THC because I won't possibly be able to inhale it, that's my right. It's my money. I paid my taxes. Let me move on. Just, I mean, maybe that response isn't good enough, but um, yeah. And then we do also have all of these products. Caitlin is mentioning in the chat, and I should bring it up. These are already childproof. All the products that we're selling are in childproof containers. So if it's childproof, it doesn't matter if it's 1 gram or 3 grams or 7 grams. It's still going to be difficult for a child to access. It doesn't really give me a lot of room for pause. I think that we will see the pushback. I think TJ is absolutely right. We just have to address it professionally and state it out with fact.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add to that is so right now our child resistant rules for our state only requires child resistancy at the point of purchase. But what we would be suggesting is a better solution for that to both address the concerns from the prevention community, but also really just making it even safer from a child resistancy standpoint is having that child resistant package be not lose its child resistant functionality after it's been opened. And those types of packages are widely available. A lot of other states actually require that by law. We do not. And so that would kind of be the compromise there. I think that really should hopefully push us across the finish line is that arguably we'd be making the products even safer from a child access perspective and reducing waste at the same time. So, I mean, honestly, I would think the prevention community should endorse this bill because it's not only increasing child safety access, but it's also a big sustainability win. And, if you care about the children, you should care about the children having a good planet to live on in the future as well. So I think that kind of really addresses that issue. And then also the last thing I'll include as far as the concentrate packaging, there's already 3 gram packs sold. There's already 7 gram packs sold. So all these larger pack sizes that some of the prevention community seem to be kind of scared of already exist in the marketplace. The only difference is, as we said earlier, they are, 4 separate jars in a blister pack or 7 separate jars in a blister pack, but it's still out there. It's already being sold in the stores today. And so we're just proposing, let's make that packaging a lot less wasteful, a lot more efficient. And ultimately, if you've got 7 grams in a CR jar, that's just as safe as 7 individual grams in child resistant packaging. Any other questions before we wrap up today? Does not look like it. Well, thank everybody for coming out today. Oh, Nathan?
Yeah, I have a quick question, and thank you all so much for being here. Just kind of to end out the thoughts, you are all experts in sustainability and or cannabis. What are the ways, whether or not this bill passes, that we can already be more sustainable consumers and purchasers of cannabis? What is currently available to us, and how would you like to see consumer behavior change?
Can I pose a question to answer that question to Heather?
Okay, good.
Heather, how much we know that Mylar is not recyclable. It's effectively just a forever in the landfill type product. But how much infrastructure do we have within Washington State for recycling glass?
Well, and by the way, the flexible packaging industry is shifting to go to other resins that have the oxygen barrier that are also more recyclable. So there is hope, I think, down the line on that as well. Glass was not recyclable for a period of a few months or maybe 6 months, 6 months ago, but we now are back in business on doing glass, and it is being recycled. And if the sizes are small, a store could collect it and then they could then, get it back to the glass folks. The law, though, the new Recycling Reform Act will require that glass be recycled. So no matter what, it will be recycled, and it just may cost a little more for the industry to send it a little further away. But it should help revive the glass industry in Washington. There's a lot of desire for that. But now, just to be clear, the Recycling Reform Act isn't going to kick in. It's got a lot of work between now and 2030. So it's going to kick in 2030. We got to get a single recycling list for the state. We've got to buy new trucks, build new facilities, do education. So all of that happens over this sort of next 4-year period, and then the law kicks in.
Great. Yeah, I would say for consumers that are trying to do their part, maybe resist the urge to purchase Mylar. Maybe resist that urge when you're looking at it. A bag can be cool and it can be shiny, but some of them can be made with bioresins. If somebody's advertising that, that they're using a biodegradable type material that does have that oxygen barrier, maybe that's worth giving them your business, because they've taken that extra step, they've spent that extra money, and sure, did it ultimately get passed along at some point through the supply chain? Yeah, sure it did, but it's a good first step in the right direction. At Painted Rooster, we've tried our best to stay away from Mylar as much as possible. We still do, and we try and stick with glass, not to mention the fact glass is less reactive. We are dealing with volatile compounds. We are dealing with cannabinoids. Glass is less reactive. You're going to get a better product from that, in my opinion. There's also better real estate to brand on. So hey, support the brands that are working, through that. And I also think that, when it comes to vape purchasing, etc., in the interim, until we can get, this battery component passed, in the interim, purchase one battery that's a really good battery and buy 5-10 carts. You can get really great oil from companies that don't want to invest, the $3 to $4 per unit into those disposables. There are great products out there that are you're going to enjoy just as much. And a lot of these batteries, you can modify the settings, and you can do all the same things that you can with a disposable device. Sure, maybe it's not as flashy, but you're going to get, a better experience, in my personal opinion, from going that direction. So.
Great. Thank you so much for the panel for coming out today to give us your expertise and feedback on this topic. Thanks for everybody that came out today live to tune in, and we'll also be publishing this on our, I believe, social channels, YouTube, and etc., for people to watch it after the fact as well. So we're really excited about this legislation that's forthcoming, and we'll be dropping that bill here for the session coming up, which is really only a couple months around the corner. One last thing I'll leave for anybody that's interested. There is a environmental majority fundraiser tomorrow night down in Seattle. The Cannabis Alliance is sponsoring that, and we'll have a few representatives there. So that's just one of many different things that we're going to be working on to connect with legislators, make sure they understand our perspective on these issues and why they're important, and make sure that we can get this thing across the finish line sooner than later. So we'll be putting in a lot of the work, and we appreciate everybody supporting us and being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.